Welcome back. If we were face to face in the classroom, I expect someone might ask, okay, we think this points to Jesus, but isn't that a Christian construct, I mean, reading the New Testament back into Isaiah? Fair enough. I want to argue an approach to this, or really any other passage, that one doesn't treat it like a fortune cookie, just a snippet isolated from context, but two, that hears the author's claims in that context, and since I take this as inspired scripture, also against the backdrop of antecedent revelation. You see, this revelation didn't just come out of the blue. Now, that bit about the importance of paying attention to antecedent revelation, I mean, what did Isaiah already understand from growing up hearing the scriptures? It implies that I buy the notion of progressive revelation. So, two things. First, from this, I infer that Isaiah knows and understands more detail of God's revelation than David. And David more than Joshua, and Joshua more than Moses. Second, I infer that Isaiah's not just blowing into a paper sack. He understands and intends that this revelation is headed somewhere. There is a trajectory. And that trajectory is aimed at the culmination of God's mission to reconcile the world to himself and restore his good creation to its intended state. So, as I understand the text, this grand culmination is phased. There's a first advent and a second advent. Now you ask, does Isaiah know that he's talking about Jesus of Nazareth, born in Bethlehem to Mary, betrothed to Joseph? And my answer is no. Isaiah doesn't know those details, but he does know where this is headed. The anointed servant of the Lord, who would vicariously suffer for the sins of many and then ultimately be established as the victorious, righteous king. Aha, I see another hand, another question. But what's the Jewish take on this song, you ask? Well, on the one hand, that's a little bit like asking, what's the Christian take on, say, baptism? Jewish thinkers come down firmly on both sides of the fence, as you will see. Now, influential thinkers going all the way back to the 2nd century AD passionately argue that the evidence requires understanding that this song is about the ideal Messiah. For example, Rabbi Yonatan ben Uziel, 2nd century AD, listen to his sort of, I call it an amplified Bible, because he's translating the Hebrew text, but he's also reading into it his interpretation in this commentary. So listen, he writes of Isaiah 52:13, "Behold my servant, the Messiah shall prosper. He shall be exalted and increase and be very strong." So he sees a personal Messiah. But watch what happens in verse 15. He shifts from the individual to the corporate. Verse 14, "Just as the house of Israel hoped for him many days, their appearance was so dark among the peoples, and their aspect beyond that of the sons of men." Then he picks up verse 15, "So he will scatter many peoples." Well, another bit of evidence, also 2nd century AD, from the Babylonian Talmud. The Messiah, what's his name? The rabbis say the leprous one. We'll come back to that. The house of Rabbi Yehuda, the saints say the sick one. as it is said, surely he has borne our sicknesses. We'll talk more about the sick one again. But the point is, here's a rabbinic understanding of Isaiah 52:53, that it's referring to an individual, to the Messiah. Another bit of evidence from the Midrash Rabbah in Ruth 4. He's speaking of the King Messiah. Come hither, draw near to the throne, and eat of the bread, that is, the bread of the kingdom. Dip thy morsel into the vinegar. This refers to the chastisements, as it is said, but he was wounded for our transgressions, bruised for our iniquities. Get it? A personal Messiah, an individual, the ideal Messiah. Now, to fast forward a little bit to the 12th century, Maimonides, or Rambam as he is sometimes known, in his letter to the South, he writes, what is the manner of the Messiah's advent? There shall rise up one of whom none have known before. Signs and wonders that they will see performed by him will be proofs of his true origin. For the Almighty, where he declares to us his mind on the matter, says, behold the man whose name is the branch, and he shall branch forth out of his place. Zechariah chapter 6. And Isaiah speaks similarly of the time when he shall appear without father or mother being known. He came up as a sucker before him, as a root out of the dry earth. In the words of Isaiah, when describing the manner in which kings will hearken at him the kings will shut their mouths. For that which had not been told them, they will have seen. And that which they had not heard, they have perceived. Or another, Rabbi Moshe Ibn Crispin, late 14th century. He writes, those who interpret Isaiah 53 as referring to Israel as those having forsaken the knowledge of our teachers and inclined after the stubbornness of their own heart and of their own opinion. He says, I am pleased to interpret it in accordance with the teaching of our rabbis of the King Messiah. This prophecy was delivered by Isaiah, he writes, at the divine command for the purpose of making known to us something about the nature of the future Messiah who is to come and deliver Israel, and his life from the day that he arrives at discretion until his advent as the Redeemer, in order that if anyone should arise claiming himself to be the Messiah, we may reflect and look and see whether we can observe in him any resemblance. Then we may believe that he is the Messiah, our righteousness. If not, we cannot do so. So, pay attention now. None of these folks are voting for Jesus, but they are arguing that the evidence points to an individual anointed by God. Remember, Hebrew anointed is, right, Mashiach, and the Greek is Christos. On the other hand, as Tevye likes to say, there are rabbis, they tend to be later when Jewish-Christian tensions are deeply felt. So there are rabbis who argue, no, this servant song can't be about a personal Messiah. So, Rabbi Shlomo Yitzhaki, Rashi, writing 11th century A.D., remember 10th, 11th century, 10th century, the Crusades, hard times. Anyway, never mind. He writes, behold, in the latter days, my servant Jacob, that is, the righteous who are in him, will prosper. So, he's sort of going, it's not an individual, and it's not the whole corporate identity, but it's the righteous remnant, the corporate body within the nation. 12th century, Abram ben Meir ibn Ezra writes with respect to Isaiah 52:13, our opponents say that it refers to their God, supposing the servant to signify his body. This, however, is impossible, for a body can't understand even during a man's lifetime. Moreover, if their view be correct, what's the meaning of seeing seed? For he, that's their God, saw no sun, or of prolonging days, which is equally untrue of him. He's saying it can't be Jesus. Jesus didn't have any kids, and he didn't live a very long life. His days were not prolonged. Well, I think it's fair to say that Ibn Ezra is wrestling here with an ideological issue more than with the prima facie evidence of Isaiah 52:53. Rabbi David Kimke, Radak, as he's affectionately referred to, understands the passage to refer to the captivity of Israel, who are called my servant, like in 41:8. And I agree that a number of these servant passages refer to the corporate servant. The question is, what's going on in 52:53? And your question was, what's the Jewish take on it? So, there you have it. Think about it. We'll see you in a bit.